how will Putin react to this? If he looks like he's going to lose the Crimea, then I think we step into a slightly different scenario. I don't think he's going to walk away from this, as I've said. Two or three issues. Clearly, there's the day-to-day fighting which continues, and we shouldn't underestimate, the casualties that are being taken and the pressures that's putting on both sides, really, but particularly on Ukraine, I think. The big issues this week, of course, have been the decisions about releasing heavy armor and other armored vehicles to Ukraine. The decision for the Prime Minister to put 14 Challenger and AS-90 and a pile of other stuff. And the discussions that I think the Germans are due to make a decision on fairly quickly in the next 24 hours, I think, about releasing Leopard tanks, the Americans, Abrams, and so on.
Yes.
And that's an important change. I think that's an important change, because 12 months ago, I think people would have been very reluctant to do that. I have to say that we should be careful here, and you would expect me to say this as a logistician, but ending up with a myriad of different vehicles is one thing, and I'm not suggesting that the Ukrainians don't need them; they do. But sustaining them, maintaining them, being able to operate them all, something like 20%, probably more, of any major army is maintenance, sustainment, logistics,
yes,
so on. And it won't be easy to maintain this range of vehicles.
yes,
And 14 Challengers on their own aren't going to make a huge amount of difference. But collectively, if the Leopard goes as well and these other vehicles arrive, that's good news. Now, the question is, will the Russians wait for these bits of equipment to arrive? Because I actually personally believe the Russians will want to put in some sort of offensive relatively soon, and probably in their own minds before the Ukrainians are in a position to do the same.
yes. And then we'll be weighing up the weight of armament and the numbers and value and quality of the forces on either side. The Wall Street Journal, Tim, is reporting German sources saying that no Leopard tanks, German Leopard tanks, that's the heavy battle tank in Germany used by other European allies, that it won't be sent to Ukraine unless the US does the same, which I assume refers to the Abrams tank. What's meant by that? Will there be any hesitation on sending tanks to Ukraine on the American side?
Well, I think there will. I mean, President Biden is under a certain amount of pressure, and the whole business of supporting Ukraine. But I don't want to be unfair, but this is a reflection, really, of Germany's attitude to this whole thing. They talk a good talk, but their support has been relatively poor, I think. They seem very reluctant to really engage with this, which is why our Prime Minister's decision was, and rightly so, he said, it was to encourage others to do the same. Whether the Americans will send Abrams, I don't know. I think they probably will in the end, but I think the Germans are very reluctant to allow Leopard to be deployed. And, it's a shame.
Yeah, and from what we've seen in Washington, in the Biden administration, he does not seem averse, at least not now, to sending more heavier, more valuable, more powerful equipment, does he? He's been looking to allies on the European side to follow suit.
Yeah, he has. And I think he has gained a bit of confidence as a result of the midterm elections and other things. But don't underestimate the pressures around him, people questioning how long this war can continue and so on. My own view is it's actually going to continue for a long time. I can't see Putin walking away from this. And every time we put more equipment in, then of course the equipment will be used and will be destroyed and used up in the battles and so on. So one of the serious questions I think across many of the countries in the West is how long can we continue to do this? The irony is, certainly from a UK perspective, is we have been reducing the numbers of our heavy armor. We've now down to we're down to one regiment of heavy armor and about 148 Challenger tanks.
Yes.
So to be sending some of them, as the Chief of the General Staff said, we're weakening our own capability here. And the numbers of stuff that we have deployed will take quite a while to replace, and not cheaply either. These equipments are expensive, guided weapons and so on, as well as things like Challenger tank. So, I don't want to be negative about this. I personally think this is a positive move. And I think it's good for the Ukrainians. But how long can it go on for? And how long can we continue to pass on this equipment when we're struggling to replace it?
Yeah.
It takes time, it takes money.
I suppose you could argue that we are not likely to need our Challenger 2 battle tanks anytime soon, or at least one hopes not, whereas Ukraine needs them now.
Well, that's certainly true. And I was saying only yesterday, there's no possibility of Russian armor moving up through Whitehall. So I think you're pretty safe sitting in the studio there. But we mustn't discount that this could expand. I mean, I don't think probably will, but it possibly still could. And whether we would put British soldiers in British armour into this fight, frankly, I very much doubt.
Mm.
So yeah, you're right in one sense, but I repeat myself. We're giving a lot of stuff to the Ukrainians, rightly so, but we need to replace it. It will take time, and Chief of General Staff is right to be concerned that our ability to deliver fighting power, not just in Europe but anywhere else,
Yes.
and wars, of course, they come from very different places over very quick times. I mean, I can think back to Iraq invading Kuwait, the problems in the Balkans, and so on. But these wars you don't get a lot of time. So we need to have and retain the ability to deploy our own combat power in any place that we might need to do so.
Yes, I was interested to read in the New York Times today that of influential voices in Washington were becoming more sympathetic to the idea of Ukraine taking the fight to Russia in Crimea, which would be an interesting development and probably requiring more heavy armor. I mean, the Bradley fighting vehicle was mentioned.
Yeah, and it is interesting. The problem is in all of this is how will Putin react to this? If he looks like he's going to lose the Crimea, then I think we step into a slightly different scenario. I don't think he's going to walk away from this, as I've said. The Donbass is the minimum that he needs to hold on to. So this potential offensive that I think they're trying to pull together, he's obviously mobilized a lot more people. He's replaced some of his commanders again. He could put in an offensive from the north through Belarus. He could put in something from the south off the sea, the maritime, to Odessa or somewhere. I mean, we don't know what he's going to do, but I don't think he's going to sit, or the Russians are going to sit idle and just sit and wait for Ukraine to do something.
Yes. Yeah,
Yes, okay, the principle of trying to retake the whole of Ukraine, including the Crimea, is clearly something that Zelensky and the Ukrainians would want to do. But I don't think this is going to be easy.
Yeah, it is also reported in the New York Times, Tim, that in Washington, the belief has grown that Putin would not wish to use nuclear weapons, battlefield nuclear weapons, whatever form of nuclear weapon. Whereas there was that fear was more widespread, wasn't it, not so long ago? And you've heard Boris Johnson, who's been in Davos, mocking the idea of Putin using nuclear weapons. He said it was like a threat from that fat boy in Dickens. He was quoting Pickwick Papers, I think, but pretty scornful.
Yeah, well, I don't want to be rude, but I rather discount Boris's comments, to be honest. Look, the Russian military doctrine does allow them, in inverted commas, under their doctrine, to use tactical nuclear weapons in certain circumstances. So, for example, if Russian soil, Russian territory is threatened or being invaded.
Yeah.
Now, from a Russian perspective, from a Putin's perspective, whatever we think of the rights and wrongs of this, they think Crimea is Russian territory. So I've never felt it was, likely or even probable that tactical nuclear weapons would be used.
Yeah.
But it's always been possible, and that possibility does not go away. Their preparedness to use chemical weapons, which they've used and supported in places like Syria under the Assad regime and so on. So it's still on the table. It's still a potential issue, and we do need to be cautious. I'm not saying we should be overly frightened about it, in inverted commas. The Russians have shown that they're not what the force that we all thought they were. But nonetheless, we do need to be cautious about assuming what Putin will or will not do.
Well,
and it's easy for us to sit and say he won't use them, but I'm not convinced that it's that simple.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine, but then I suppose I couldn't anyway. I'm no expert in these things. But I just can't imagine what sort of intelligence would lead analysts in Washington to decide that Putin was much less likely to use nuclear weapons. It's not as if you can read his mind, and I don't imagine that anyone's got a secret recording of him musing out loud about the subject in the Kremlin.
No, I agree. I mean, Sun Tzu said 3,000 years ago, if you understand yourself and you understand the enemy, you need not fear the outcome of 1,000 battles. Now, understanding Putin and understanding what's going on in the Kremlin and in his immediate circle of the various hoods that support him is not easy. And it's not, I know one's got to be careful about these comparisons, but it's rather like trying to decide what Hitler was going to do in 1944-45. We can't see that clearly. Now, there is good intelligence. I don't discount that. And our own MOD intelligence and intelligence updates have been extremely good, I think, over the last year. But the idea that we know for certain what is in Putin's mind is, in my view, a misjudgment.